"Ms. Walker, this courtroom isn't a place for fantasy," the judge said, his tone sharp but amused. "You mean to tell me you can represent yourself, and you speak 9 languages?" 9. Laughter echoed around the room. A few jurors shook their heads. The prosecutor smirked. But Danielle Walker, standing tall at the defense table, didn't move a muscle. Her suit was borrowed, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes burned with quiet conviction. "Yes, Your Honor," she said clearly. 9 languages. And I'll use every one of them to show the truth. The judge sighed, flipping through her file. "You're accused of altering immigration documents, defrauding a federal client, and destroying evidence. And yet, you refuse an attorney." Danielle met his gaze. "I don't need one to prove what really happened." The chuckles died down slightly, but disbelief still filled the air. A year earlier, Danielle had been working as an administrative assistant at a small immigration law firm in Richmond, Virginia. She wasn't a lawyer, but she was smart, smarter than anyone gave her credit for. From a young age, she'd been obsessed with languages. Spanish from her neighbors. French from old library tapes. Korean and Arabic from online study groups. Her mother, Gloria, used to say, "Words will open doors, baby. But only if you're brave enough to speak them." And Danielle had spoken boldly, until her voice cost her everything. One Friday night, she stayed late at the firm to organize files. She noticed her boss, Harold Whitman, in his office, whispering on the phone and feeding papers into a shredder. Curious, she leaned in and saw something that made her freeze: federal immigration forms stamped with official seals. He was destroying evidence. The next morning, she reported what she saw to the state bar hotline. She thought she was doing the right thing. 2 days later, she was arrested. Forgery. Document tampering. Fraud. Her fingerprints were found on one of the shredded folders, because she'd been the one to file it weeks earlier. The story exploded across local news: Black woman accused of immigration fraud. Her neighbors turned cold. The firm fired her. Now she stood in that courtroom alone, defending her name. The judge leaned back. "Ms. Walker, this court is not amused by exaggerated claims. If you truly speak 9 languages, prove it." Danielle inhaled deeply. "Very well." She began in Spanish, her tone effortless. Then she switched to French, then to Russian, each word crisp and precise. The laughter faded. She spoke in Arabic, then Mandarin, Korean, German, Italian, and Swahili, 9 languages, each rolling off her tongue with confidence. When she finished, the silence was complete. Even the stenographer paused, her fingers hovering midair. The judge finally spoke. "Well, I'll admit, that's impressive. But talent isn't evidence." Danielle nodded. "No, Your Honor. But understanding what others couldn't, that's what uncovered the truth." He raised an eyebrow. "Explain." She reached into her file folder and handed over several printed emails. These were messages sent between Mr. Whitman and his overseas contact. Some were written in Russian and Arabic, languages no one in that office except me could read. The prosecutor scoffed. "And you expect us to believe these translations?" "You can verify them," Danielle said calmly. "Each message includes the same instruction: delete refugee applications before the audit." The judge looked uneasy. "You obtained these how?" "Public records request," she said. "All legal." The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Objection. This is not certified evidence." The judge held up a hand. "We'll review the documents." "For now, overruled." Danielle called her first witness, Angela Ruiz, the firm's evening custodian. Angela was nervous, her English broken, so Danielle switched easily into Spanish, translating every word for the court as Angela described seeing Whitman shredding files late at night. The judge blinked. "You don't need the interpreter." Danielle smiled faintly. No, Your Honor. I just need the truth to be heard, clearly. By the time Angela finished, even the prosecutor looked uneasy. Danielle thanked her softly before stepping back. When court adjourned for lunch, Danielle sat outside on the courthouse steps, staring at the sky. Her hands shook, but not from fear. She'd stood alone, and she hadn't fallen. Her younger brother, Cameron, rushed over with a grin. You were incredible, Danny. The judge didn't even know what to say. She managed a tired laugh. He'll have plenty to say tomorrow. Whitman's testifying. Cameron's smile faded. You think he'll lie again? Of course, she said. But this time, I'll understand every word he tries to hide. She looked up at the courthouse, tall and cold against the afternoon sun, and whispered the words her mother had told her years ago, words open doors. Inside that courtroom tomorrow, she would break them wide open. That night, in her small apartment, Danielle spread her documents across the kitchen table. Pages written in 9 different languages, emails, memos, translations, all proof of what her boss had done. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She hesitated before answering. A distorted voice whispered, "Drop the case, Ms. Walker. Or next time, it won't be just your job." Her stomach turned cold. She hung up, staring at her shaking hands. For a moment, she thought about quitting. Then she remembered her mother's voice, steady, warm, unyielding. Baby, when the world tries to silence you, that's when you speak louder. The next morning, Danielle walked into court again, her back straight, her folder clutched to her chest. Whitman was waiting on the witness stand, his suit perfect, his smirk sharper than ever. The judge looked between them. Ms. Walker, are you ready to proceed? She met Whitman's eyes. Yes, Your Honor. This time, she wasn't the frightened assistant from the firm. She was a fighter, armed with truth in 9 languages. And before the day was over, she was going to make the man who destroyed her reputation eat every word he'd ever spoken. When the courtroom reconvened, the air felt heavier, like everyone could sense something big was about to happen. Danielle stood beside the defense table, a calm storm in her eyes. The judge nodded for the proceedings to begin. Mr. Whitman, the prosecutor started smoothly, you were Ms. Walker's employer for 3 years, correct? Whitman smiled, polished and confident. That's right. And during that time, did you ever witness her mishandling or altering client records? Absolutely, he said without hesitation. She often stayed late. I trusted her with access to confidential files, but when we discovered errors, altered data, missing documents, it always led back to her login credentials. Danielle didn't move. She let him talk. He was too comfortable, too sure of himself. When it was finally her turn, she stepped toward the witness stand. Mr. Whitman, she began quietly, you said I stayed late. Do you recall what I was doing those nights? He smirked. Trying to cover up your mistakes, I assume. Danielle tilted her head slightly. Interesting. Because the firm's security footage shows you in the office at the same time, feeding papers into a shredder. He blinked. The courtroom murmured. You're mistaken, he said quickly. I was cleaning up old client files. She opened a folder and held up a photo. This was taken from that footage. That's not a mop in your hand, sir. That's a document shredder bag. The prosecutor stood. Objection, Your Honor. These images haven't been authenticated. The judge frowned but waved for Danielle to continue. Overruled. Let's see where this goes. Danielle's voice stayed steady. You see, Mr. Whitman, you weren't shredding old files. You were destroying refugee petitions before the state audit. The same ones found in fragments at the office dumpster. He shifted in his seat. You can't prove that. I can, she said. Because you left your signature hidden in the metadata, right next to phrases written in Russian. You thought no one would notice because no one else at that firm could read it. The judge leaned forward. Russian? Danielle nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Allow me to translate. She picked up one of the recovered documents and began reading aloud. Delete the Sudanese applications. Replace with blank templates before the review. That's what it says in Russian. And that line, she added, pointing to another, was written in Arabic. Blame the assistant if questions arise. Gasps filled the courtroom. Whitman's face flushed deep red. You're twisting this, he snapped. Those aren't my words. Danielle's expression stayed calm. Then why were those files sent from your work account at 9:47 p.m., the night before my arrest? The judge turned sharply toward the prosecutor. Is that timestamp verified? The prosecutor hesitated, flipping through the case file. It appears to match the system logs. A murmur swept the room. The judge leaned back, studying Whitman carefully now. This is serious, Mr. Whitman. You may want to watch your next words. Danielle continued softly, you tried to bury innocent people's applications, and when I caught you, you buried me instead. Whitman's lawyer rose, voice cracking. Your Honor, my client. Sit down, the judge ordered. Danielle walked closer to the stand, her heart pounding but her voice steady. You said I was incompetent. You mocked my education. But the truth is, I understood everything you thought I wouldn't. You used foreign languages to hide your crimes. And now, they're the very thing exposing you. Whitman tried to speak, but no sound came out. His eyes darted nervously across the courtroom. Danielle stepped back. No further questions. The judge looked around the room. We're taking a 10-minute recess, he announced, striking his gavel. And Mr. Whitman, I suggest you consult with your counsel. As everyone filed out, Danielle sat quietly, her hands clasped in her lap. Her brother Cameron rushed to her side. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. Not yet, she said softly. But we're close. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, about the languages, about the evidence, about the viral clips already circulating online. Danielle didn't stop. She wasn't doing this for fame. She was doing it for her name, and for every immigrant family Whitman had hurt. When court resumed, the prosecutor's tone had changed. She no longer sounded confident. Your Honor, she said carefully, in light of the new evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Ms. Walker pending verification of the emails and timestamps. The judge looked at Danielle. Ms. Walker, do you have any objection to that motion? Danielle took a breath, her eyes glistening. No, Your Honor. I just want the truth on record. The judge nodded slowly. Then it's so ordered. Whitman's lawyer exploded. This is absurd. You're taking her word. The judge's gavel slammed down. Enough. I've seen enough testimony to know when someone's lying. Ms. Walker's work is detailed, consistent, and, frankly, extraordinary. He turned toward her. You've proven not only your intelligence, but your courage. This court owes you an apology. For a moment, Danielle couldn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes as the judge continued. All charges against you are hereby dropped. You are free to go. The courtroom erupted, reporters whispering, people clapping softly despite protocol. Whitman sat frozen, pale, and speechless. Danielle exhaled, her shoulders shaking. Cameron hugged her tight, whispering, You did it, Danny. Mom would be so proud. The judge called after her as she gathered her papers. Ms. Walker, he said, his tone now softer, you said earlier you speak 9 languages. What will you do with them now? She smiled faintly. Help people who don't have a voice. The ones who get ignored because they can't be understood. The judge nodded, visibly moved. Then God help anyone who tries to silence you again. As Danielle walked out of the courthouse, the cold wind hit her face, but she didn't feel it. She felt lighter, like the weight she'd carried for a year had finally fallen away. Reporters swarmed her, microphones flashing. "Danielle, how does it feel to win?" one called out. She paused at the top of the courthouse steps, looking straight into the cameras. "It's not about winning," she said softly. "It's about being heard. For me, and for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." The crowd went quiet. That night, Danielle sat by her window with a cup of tea, her phone buzzing with messages of support. People from around the country were calling her the woman who spoke truth in 9 languages. She smiled and opened her old journal, the one her mother had given her years ago. Inside, she'd once written a line that now felt prophetic: "Language can build bridges or burn walls. Choose the bridge." She closed the book, whispering to the night air, "Thank you, Mama." Outside, the city lights shimmered. Somewhere out there, a new family, one of the refugees she'd helped, was safe because of her courage. And somewhere deep inside, the girl who'd once been mocked in that courtroom stood tall, knowing her mother's words had finally come true. Her voice had been her weapon. And this time, it changed everything.